Welcome, everyone, from a beautiful day. Again, here on the campus of Notre Dame. It's supposed to get up to 56 degrees today. And when you combine that with St. Patrick's Day, which is a very special day, not only around the country and around the world, but especially here on the campus of Notre Dame, it makes for a really good day to be alive. And thank you for taking time out of your St. Patrick's Day celebrations to join us for what I think is going to be a really special interview and certainly timely for today. Just a couple of brief updates, if I could. First, about the COVID situation, things continue to remain relatively steady here on campus with the number of cases. We had 24 new cases this past Monday on campus with a massive testing that we're doing, surveillance across the board. That keeps our 7-day positivity rate at a little less than 1%, at about 0.8%, which is certainly manageable. We'd like that to be a little bit lower, and we keep working to do that. But things are going reasonably well, and as we try to manage through this pandemic. Hopefully, the final couple of months of this semester will allow us to take a breather and come back to a different reality next fall with our students. Probably many of you heard the news that came out that Zom Hall is going to be transitioned to a swing dorm for the next few years. And it's going to be a place where first Soren Hall and then other older dorms that need about 14 months to be renovated. Many of these old original dorms have the original HVAC, pipes, all kinds of stuff, and we can't just do those kinds of renovations over summer. And so there'll be a successive number of dorms that will be renovated, gutted basically, and renovated over the coming years. And ZOM will be the swing dorm for that. We're dealing with some of the controversy and the emotions surrounding that issue right now, but we're hopeful that all will work out as we move forward. But today is a day, as I said, right now for celebration, especially at Notre Dame, St. Patrick's Day, and we could not ask for a better guest. In fact, I think went back and booked him about 3 months ago for this particular day. And so we're really pleased to welcome Professor Patrick Griffin. He is the Madden-Hennebry Professor of History, focusing on the Irish American experience. And since January of 2018, he has also been serving as the director of the Keough-Naughton Institute for Irish Studies here on campus, one of Notre Dame's academic and experiential jewels for our students, arguably the highest rated Irish studies program in the world outside of Ireland. And we're really privileged to benefit from his leadership there. Patrick received his PhD in American history from Northwestern. Prior to that, he graduated from Notre Dame in the proud class of 1987, together with his wife, Mary Hope, also a classmate. They have 4 children. Two daughters are undergraduate students. One is an alum, and one is learning all things nuclear right now on a Navy submarine. So, Patrick, welcome to this program. Thank you so much for carving out some time on a busy day, especially for you, St. Patrick's Day. Could you start off by maybe sharing an anecdote, an insightful or fun story from St. Patrick's Day that might kick us off on the right start?
Well, first, Lou, thanks for having me. It's good to be here, my friend, and hello to everybody out there. Okay, so a story. Well, here's one for you. So I want you to kind of bring your mind back to BC before COVID. And a couple of years ago, in that world that is difficult for us to conjure, I was invited to go to New York by some Notre Dame people out in the city, and I was going to be a guest of the Fighting 69th, the so-called Irish Brigade, Father Corby's unit during the Civil War. Of course, historically, they lead the parade out every single year. And so before the parade, anyway, we got to go to St. Patrick's Cathedral. We're going to have the big St. Patrick's Day Mass. So my wife and I and my sister, whose daughter is a senior here at Notre Dame, we're going in, and we're cordoned off. We're not allowed to go to our seats because all the priests are assembling. And then lo and behold, one of the priests there is my cousin, Thomas. And he said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were in town. Come over here." So he says, I want you to meet the Cardinal. So we meet Cardinal Dolan. We have a lovely discussion. Of course, he knows so many people here at Notre Dame. We're yabbering about this, that, and the other thing. We finally make our way to our seats. We go to the parade. We have a great day. The next day is Sunday. And so we're going to Mass. We decide, let's go to St. Patrick's Cathedral again. And so we go and we take a seat right in the center aisle. We're there. Cardinal Dolan is saying the Mass. And then he decides on this day to actually give a sermon about St. Patrick. So that's fine. The Mass ends, and he's recessing down the center aisle. And he sees me, and he comes over to me, stops the recession, shakes my hand, and said, when I started that sermon, I looked out and I saw you, and I almost peed myself. Here I'm talking about the history of St. Patrick's Day, and we have a Notre Dame professor. And I was thinking about all the things that I was making up and all the things that I got wrong on top of it. So it was great. We had a good chat, and then we went back to his residence and had some coffee. But it was a wonderful, fun day, fun event. There's nothing like New York on St. Patrick's Day.
I love it. Well, it's that's a great story. He is such a charismatic leader and such a warm personality, but he's also got a sharp mind. You could tell as he recognized you from one day to the next I'm sure what was a very large crowd. But today's also a really special day for you, not just because it's St. Patrick's Day, but it's also your birthday. Yeah. So on behalf of your parents, I want to say happy birthday to you, named after St. Patrick's, born on St. Patrick's Day. It's a pretty iconic background that leads you to lead this Keough-Naughton Institute for Irish Studies at Notre Dame. But I got to ask you a fundamental question. First of all, St. Patrick's Day. I'm Italian. We in a couple days, there's be a small smattering of us wearing red for St. Joseph's Day. Nobody really recognizes St. Joseph's Day, not even most Italians. But everybody has their patron saints, the different ethnicities, nations, and so forth. How has St. Patrick's Day made itself such a global holiday, such a national holiday? What is it about the Irish experience and about the Irish American experience in particular that really sets it apart?
Well, Lou, I think unfortunately you guys put your money on Columbus Day, so we picked the right one. And I think it goes to the fact of actually why Notre Dame exists is because Notre Dame is in many ways an institution that's formed and shaped by the Irish diaspora, which is a global diaspora. The one thing the Irish are known for more than anything else is movement, people moving all over the world. And when they did, they wanted to kind of situate themselves in the places they lived in by invoking the old country, invoking Ireland. The thing about it is that, like St. Patrick's Day, for the most part, it's a big Irish holiday, don't get me wrong. But it's really, as we know it, worldwide an Irish-American holiday that really, since the time of the American Revolution, it's been celebrated. And was celebrated in the Continental Army by all the Irish soldiers that were there, and then early on when the immigrants start coming, even before the famine, they're kind of trying to claim the streets as theirs by parading. And so St. Patrick's Day means that, we belong. And it's so tied in also at this point in American life to American patriotism that it's really difficult to kind of figure out where that hyphen between Irish and American, where it actually sits. So ironically, it's one of the ultimate American holidays.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so what brought you back to Notre Dame? I mean, you're first of all, on both levels, you grow up in New York City, and I was traveling around the country. When you go to Texas, I always joke that Texans think they're bigger and better than the rest of the country, and if you go to New York City, they just don't even know the rest of the country exists. So how did you find Notre Dame? Growing up in the New York City metro area, and then after you graduate and get your PhD, you become a very distinguished professor at the University of Virginia, one of the top, academic institutions in the country. How are we able to recruit you back to Notre Dame a second time?
Well, the first story actually kind of involves St. Patrick's Day too. All right. And so it goes with kind of wearing green. You know, I hate wearing green on St. Patrick's Day. I always have for the very reasons you talked about. Imagine this, being the son of Irish immigrants, being named Patrick, being born on St. Patrick's Day. It's almost like this stuff is almost overdetermined. And being the son of immigrants, you kind of have a bit of an ambivalent attitude to ethnicity. You always do. It's kind of textbook to a certain way. So I hated wearing green, except for one thing. When I was a kid, my parents bought me, I remember to this day, a green Vegas Ferguson Notre Dame jersey, number 32, right? So I'm young, I'm in grade school. He's like, you know, kind of one of the best running backs in the country. And it was, you know, we just supported different sports teams growing up in that area, but there was no ambiguity about who you supported when it came to college. It was Notre Dame. That was it. Notre Dame was the be all and end all. So even though my father, who didn't go to college, my mother, you know, who came over from Ireland also, for them, Notre Dame was always a special place, you know, and had a special place in our hearts. And I didn't know why. But
Mhm.
soon enough, as I begin investigating things, you start to say, oh, well, you know, Notre Dame is actually an extraordinary academic institution.
Mhm.
And then I started talking to people and said, well, you know what, let me apply. And I
Mhm.
applied, and then I got in, and I came here sight unseen because somewhere back in my life anyway, there was a dream about this place and what this place represented, particularly for me as I was growing up. So that's how I got here to begin with. You know, I was fortunate enough too to have a great aunt that we lived with who was more or less my grandmother, and she was a domestic from Ireland.
Mhm.
And she had set up through her savings anyway, a college fund for me and my sister to go to college. And so that enabled me to go to Notre Dame. So her kind of cooking for rich folks here, washing floors and everything like that was one of the reasons why I was able to come. Um, so that's what got me here in the first place. What got me here then later on was I think that we're up to something really, really exciting here. And to try to be the world's great Catholic Research Institute university with kind of stressing each of those particular points was, to me, that was something of an extraordinary experiment. And so I thought to myself, if I want to spend my life at some institution doing something, wouldn't it be pretty cool to come to a place like this that's trying to do something different and trying to do something I think that really, really matters? And so that's what drew me back.
That's a great story, of both on both levels. You know, is that the way I describe it sometimes, Patrick, is that you know, if you look at the top 20 schools over the last, you know, few decades, um, all of which would be private for the most part, um, all but I think one began as religiously founded institutions, and all but Notre Dame have left their religious heritage behind. Doesn't
Absolutely.
make us better than or holier than the other institutions, but it does make us, what we're doing here is different and distinct. To be one of the top academic institutions and also be grounded in a spiritual tradition, a religious tradition, is unique. It's not unlike an expedition to Mars. You know, it's not easily done. We don't know for sure if we're going to make it. People of goodwill are going to take shots along the way saying you're doing too much of this, too little of that. But it is a unique experiment, and it does feel a privilege to be part of its unfolding vision. Why Irish studies, though? In Notre Dame, but in any discipline, why not Polish studies or Italian studies or Greek studies? What is it about the Irish experience that makes it special, that makes it distinct?
Well, it's not to downplay any of those other ethnic groups at all. I mean, you know, I think America is an extraordinary place because of all the various ethnicities. But I do think that kind of the Irishness has an important role here, particularly at Notre Dame, but particularly in our cities too. That I think our culture was shaped by Irish immigrants, but also kind of the culture that they brought. And that's what makes Ireland, if you will, kind of a powerhouse. It's a place that we would say kind of like stereotypically almost, it punches above its weight. It punches above its weight because of how extraordinary its culture is, its literature, its language, its history, its music. All these are the sorts of things that people from around the world look to. And that voice is further amplified by the fact, as I mentioned before, kind of the global diaspora, that the Irish are all over the world.
Yeah.
And there are so many of them going to come to America during a particularly formative period of time that it really did shape in important ways American culture as well. And I think that's why we kind of are transfixed with Irish culture and with Irish studies in this country in particular. But it's not only to us. Like if you go to England, there's fantastic stuff, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, So many of these places kind of are focused upon this because the Irish story is their stories also. And to seeing it in all of its variety, almost like mosaic-like, is something I think that is not only worthy of study, that's for sure, but also it speaks powerfully to our identity here at Notre Dame, but also our identity as Americans.
Well, that's a great answer. And another way of saying it is that the universal is in the particular. And in
Yes.
the particular of the Irish experience, you see overcoming oppression, the fighting Irish, dealing with all kinds of adversity and staying as a resilient people. It's an amazing story and something
Yeah,
that all.
and what I would say too, like every single one of my classes, Lou, I will kind of answer that question where I give them all a deep dive on like the deep history of the Fighting Irish,
Mhm.
and saying that this kind of in all of its manifestations is your story too. You're a
Yeah.
part of it. And what are you going to add to that chapter? And I think connecting them to those sorts of stories, as you put those histories of oppression, but also of vindication later on, is really powerful for them as they try to navigate their way through our world today.
In all of your travels and your time in Charlottesville and now especially here in South Bend and at Notre Dame, you're still a New York City boy, and that's deeply influenced your scholarship and your outlook on life. Can you tell us a little bit about how New York and the Irish diaspora has really influenced what you're up to?
Well, I mean, the cool thing about New York is like it's a place that, if you have a kind of a historically trained eye, is layer after layer after layer of history. Sometimes hard to see, but if you just start scratching,
Yeah.
you can really see it. And when I started scratching, because I just found the place fascinating, I found all kinds of interesting things. First, about my own history and my own family. So when I was a kid working in high school, I actually worked on the Bowery, right on the street on the Bowery. I had a weekend job there. So I'd go to this place. Then Bowery was kind of the down and out place when I was a kid. My mom would always say, whenever she was really upset with me, you're going to end up like one of those bums on the Bowery. And so I'm working on the Bowery, and just across the street from it was this building. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but it used to house this place called McGurk's Suicide Hall, the most notorious bar in all of New York. It was an Irish bar at the time. I didn't know this. But soon as you get older, you start to discover these kinds of things. And then you discover more stuff about New York. That New York isn't only interesting in and of itself, that New York becomes, over the course of the 19th century, the most important place on planet Earth. And so it's a place where my family is connected to, where I'm connected to, but also kind of is part and parcel of this deep history. It is a machine that turned Europeans and other people from other parts of the world into Americans. And I find that story to be kind of so fascinating, because going back to where we started, that's kind of like my story too.
Hmm.
And so what I find in New York is the intersection at so many different levels of all of this amazing stuff. And so I find myself just kind of drawn to it again and again. And so when I was like first just starting out in graduate school, it's like, you know what, I really like to cover New York. I didn't end up doing it there, but I always promised myself I would with time. And I think now that time in my professional career has finally come.
So tell us about that next book that you're working on, which involves a deeper dive into New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really having fun thinking about it, and this is what I'll probably be doing next year and for the next couple years. And I got a simple question: if I say that New York at one point in the 19th century, like was transformed from like a seaport into the most important place on planet Earth, right? How did that happen?
Hmm.
Well, it just so happens that this is the time you have massive Irish migration into the city. So the Irish we know are building this with their hands, but I'm looking at something different. I want to see attitudes. I want to see sensibilities. We often think, right, that we think about a place like New York is like peasants come over and they have to adapt themselves to the city. But I think, what about if the opposite is just the case? Suppose the city adapts itself to the people coming in. That's what I think happened. Because the Irish are the first major group to come over, just as New York is transitioning, and they're helping in that transition to become kind of like this node of power around the world. The Irish, with their kind of their strengths and some of their darker aspects too, are the ones who I think are shaping that becoming. And that's what I want to get at, the shaping of that becoming. And so this book, I hope, is going to go neighborhood by neighborhood, place
Hmm.
by place, everywhere from the 5 Points to Hell's Kitchen and all points in between, of these kind of areas that the Irish staked out as theirs, and how in each of these particular neighborhoods and its history over time, we can see certain of these attributes that they more or less kind of contributed to the culture that would create New York. And so that's what I think I'm going to do. It's really going to be fun. It's going to be me at times, sometimes an angle of approach may be me walking through a neighborhood today. And that's what I did last summer. I walked all the neighborhoods in New York, as I was thinking more and more about this book. Just sometimes it may be the history of what happened there. Maybe it's something of what the place looks like now. So I'm really interested in kind of attacking this book neighborhood by neighborhood from all different sorts of angles, just to try to get at this question of like, what made New York and what made New York the world's most important city?
Well, that sounds like that's going to be an absolutely fascinating read. Well, just recently, it was a big announcement here on campus that a huge distinction, a huge award was bestowed on you for your um, uh, years of service to the academy, your scholarly research, and your contributions to history writ large. You received the prestigious Harmsworth Visiting Professor Fellowship at Oxford. And in the 99-year history of this award, they only choose one historian annually. You are the only Notre Dame faculty member to ever receive that distinction. So you're going to be off, still running the Keough-Naughton Irish Institute from there. Beginning in September, you'll be off for the next academic year at Oxford. Can you tell us a little bit first how you were selected and maybe why you were selected and what you hope to do over the course of this coming year?
Well, Lou, as you know, you may not know this because you're from Buffalo, but the first thing you got to do is you got to bribe the right people. That's it. So, if I learned anything in New York, I learned about politics. No, it didn't work out that way at all. It was just kind of a complete surprise. And so it works. You are nominated over there. You don't know any of this. And then eventually you're elected. And then ultimately it's kind of the head of Oxford is the person who makes the final determination. And so I was just kind of told before Christmas that you've been awarded this. It's a pretty cool fellowship because it started by this guy with the Harmsworth family. By name is Lord Rothermere. And one of his kids was killed in the First World War. And to honor him and to try to do what he could to, if you will, kind of foster greater American and British relations, he decided to endow this. And so they take one American historian who happens to be an American each year, and they go to Oxford. Well, you have a year basically to write and to work with some of the people that are there and to really kind of just do great things, but like to serve as, if you will, kind of an ambassador between the American people and between the British. And so it's really gratifying for me. It's a once in a lifetime thing. And really, it's what's pretty cool about it is I'm humbled because I look at the list of the people that have been selected before, who are really some of the titans in the field, including my graduate advisor was one who did it 20 years ago. And so to be selected is a pretty neat thing. And to really come from Notre Dame too, that's going to be great too, because I'll be an ambassador for Notre Dame over there also. I think it speaks a lot too to kind of how Notre Dame has changed really over the last generation, that we are what I think is just a first-rate academic institution, and it's increasingly recognized by, I think, people around the world. So to go over there for the year is going to be wonderful, and like I say, to be an ambassador for this place is going to be really, really gratifying for me.
That's fantastic. Congratulations to you,
Thanks so much.
sincerely from the heart. And it's a great honor not only for you and your family, but for Notre Dame, for you to be selected. We know that you and Mary Hope, your wife, who is an amazing physician here locally, who works with the underserved populations, many who are struggling, with considerable economic hardship and other issues, are going to be great ambassadors for Notre Dame and Oxford. So we're really, really happy for you. Tell us a little bit about the Keough-Naughton Institute for Irish Studies. In particular, what makes it so appealing to our students here on campus, and what distinguishes it as arguably the best in class among all of the Irish diaspora throughout the world?
I think one thing that we've been able to do, a couple things go into that. We've been able to attract some extraordinarily talented people who are committed to studying Ireland. And historically, we have a lot of people who focus on the language of Ireland, the history of Ireland, the literature of Ireland. And we have some of the best people in the world who do that. So other places around the world will look at us and will respect us just for what we're able to do. I also think, and this is really just as important because I think it's a 1-2 punch, is our benefactors have been so good to us, that kind of enabling us to do this. And so it enables us to bring the most talented people here to Notre Dame who are
Mhm.
studying things. It also allows our students to have unparalleled experiences in Ireland, and so it's the way that you find over and over again when you talk to our students. They start at first thinking they're doing kind of like heritage tourism, like they're going back to Ireland and rediscovering the roots. But they soon discover when they go over there about kind of how intellectually rich and intellectually vibrant this tradition is they're studying. And they quickly fall in love with it. It starts with the heart and it ends with the head. And I think that's what we're able to combine here at Notre Dame in particular. So you put those two things together, sort of like the patronage we have, but also the excellence that we're known for, and the fact that that attracts our students. But putting it here at Notre Dame really makes it different because, being the Fighting Irish, this again goes to the very core of who we are. And so I think it's vitally important that we're the world leader. And you mentioned earlier on that there are places in Ireland that are better for us. Lou, I'd love to hear what ones you think they are, because I happen to think we're the world's best, bar none.
Bar none. So, take on Trinity College and take on
I'm only kidding. They're all our partners. We love our friends at Trinity, et cetera, et
I
cetera.
love it. I love it. Well, we have an incredible presence in there. We own facilities right in the heart of Dublin. We have a major presence where we own a facility as well at Kylemore on the West Coast, but give us everybody a sense of studying the Irish language, right? You think about people studying Chinese, you think of studying Spanish and other languages. How many students roughly right now are studying the Irish language here at Notre Dame?
Well, we have dozens of students who study it, and the ones who do really have, like I say, extraordinary experiences, because the one thing they study in the classroom, and we have some instructors that are second to none when it comes to teaching the language.
Yeah.
But we discover it's anything but a dead language that you may think about in the diaspora doesn't connect to it because we're completely Anglophone. But there are places in Ireland where the language is central to their very identity and their way of being. And we're fortunate because of, again, benefaction. We're able to send our students over there to kind of go to the Gaeltacht and to kind of learn the language as the language is spoken in an everyday kind of way. And what we tell our students this is that, what you're going to be given because of this is kind of a deep dive into the culture that would be impossible otherwise. The language, it opens a door. And it opens a door that you're just not going to get in other kinds of ways. And so what we like to say is we offer students, if you will, like a three-dimensional understanding, and kind of language is a constituent element of it too.
Wow, that's fantastic. Um, it's a big year coming up for Irish studies, and there's some major global celebrations. I believe next year's the 100th anniversary of the publication of James Joyce's kind of renowned work, Ulysses.
Right.
In fact, I was a program of liberal studies major way back in the day. I remember spending an entire class day just talking about two words: meretricious beauty. And what did meretricious beauty mean to Joyce, and what was he trying to connote there? These kind of little things that stick with you when I can't remember my kids' own names from day to day. But how do we plan to celebrate that 100th anniversary of Ulysses, and what other plans do you have for the coming year?
Well, the next year, as you say, is kind of going to be a year of centenaries in Ireland. And so we have a lot planned. We're working with the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland and with partners at Irish universities and universities abroad, really to kind of like headline a number of things that are going to be going on. First, when it comes to Ulysses, we have a program that's called Global Ulysses. Ulysses, of course, I should say Joyce, of course, is Irish, but Joyce is renowned as probably being the world's greatest modernist writer. And because of that, his influence is literally global. And so we're going to try to understand him in his own context as being Irish, but
Mhm.
also how that translates around the world. So we're going to be having events that we're hosting in Paris, in Rome, and then finally, after those, back in Dublin to kind of really interrogate this text for one whole year. We're going to be inviting people who are leading writers all over Europe and all over the world to discuss how we should think about this seminal work today. So that's going to be really exciting. We're going to have books that are going to be published based upon that. So this is going to be one of the things that we're going to be quarterbacking next year. Another thing we're doing too is also to recognize the centenary of the state. So the state of Ireland comes into being also 100 years ago, as does the state of Northern Ireland. So as the Irish are commemorating this, it's almost like, if you will, like our moment after we kind of signed the Constitution. Um, what does that mean? How do the Irish think about the state today? How do they think about it at the time? And we're going to do it in ingenious ways, I think, Lou. One thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking art, for example, that's produced right at the time of the formation of the state. And so we can try to understand better how a nation tries to define itself. How does it use the visible, the aesthetic to try to say, this is who we are? The Irish were doing it like crazy about 100 years ago. And so we're going to be working with the Snipe Museum, also with what's the renowned O'Brien Collection in Chicago, okay, to try to look at some representative works and use these as jumping off points to discuss nation and nation building. But the cool thing about Ireland is that you can look at this place and understand it in and of itself, but it allows you to have all different kinds of discussions that don't even deal with Ireland, but allow other people to think about their own processes of state building and how they're building, if you will, the idea of a nation. And so we're going to welcome and invite all comers to these conferences that we're going to be hosting, all to start, if you will, a broad conversation about these seminal kinds of issues.
Well, on top of all of that, it sounds like you've got a big initiative that you're launching in the coming year on William Butler Yeats as well, and in partnership with the Royal Irish Academy, which is the highest, most prestigious level of academe in Ireland. Can you tell us more about this endeavor?
Yeah, well, that's actually two endeavors, and I think it goes right to the heart of kind of who we are and where we're going. All right, who we are. So, really, Don Keough, one of our patrons anyway, had a great, great love for Yeats and all things Yeats. And his son, Michael, and the rest of the Keough family have been instrumental in bringing to us, I think, a great opportunity to become kind of a leading center for the study of Yeats, who, along with Joyce, kind of stands up as almost kind of the two titans of Irish literature. We do so much with Joyce. Now we want to do more with Yeats. And so through their help and through kind of the leadership of Barry McCrae, one of our leading scholars anyway, we're going to be working on creating a new Yeats initiative. And this is going to involve us trying to foster the very best work on Yeats, who is still regarded as kind of so important to kind of understanding Irish literature. We also want to produce some of his plays. He was a playwright as well, and we're going to be partnering with Lisa Caulfield at Kylemore Abbey to do some work and try to resurrect some of his work, right, and bring it to the world again in some sort of way. We're also going to be sponsoring conferences. So this is going to be kind of a new jumping off point for us as we kind of do historically what we've done so well, and that is focus upon literature and everything. When you talked about the Royal Irish Academy, this is going to be one of the really fascinating things we're also going to be doing in the future. We're partnering with them with a project that we call Errands. And this is analyzing research and researching Ireland North and South. And this project is one where we hope to really kind of be a leading voice and to, as the Irish are really trying to figure out who they are and what direction they should be going during this moment. With Brexit has transformed the political discussion in Ireland, has led people to think that maybe we have to work on the relationships between North and South in more intentional ways than we have before. Some people are also talking about potential reunification between Ireland, North and South. Well, if you remember what happened with Germany, they were caught, if you will, almost with their pants down when it came to reunification and caused all kinds of problems. These things are heightened for Ireland because of a history of violence there as well. So is there any way that the Irish can have a conversation now about these critical issues that don't only involve politics, involve economics, culture, social matters? Is there a way for that to happen? So we're partnering with the Royal Irish Academy to see if we can lend our voice to that. Now, it's very important because we're Americans, we're very conscious of the fact that we are outsiders coming in. Our job is not to tell, not to inform or anything like that. It's to foster. And we hope to foster discussion and dialogue, and in partnership with some of the very leading scholars around the world who study kind of things Irish today, this is going to be one of our other new initiatives. So like I said right at the beginning with this great question, we are doing things that speak to who we were, and we want to kind of reinforce that and build upon that. But we're also looking to build sorts of new avenues, and Errands is with the Royal Irish Academy is one way for us to do that.
Fantastic. Sounds really exciting. You mentioned Don Keough, the late Don and Mickey Keough.
Yeah.
He, spearheaded the launch of this institute in the 1990s. And then they were joined by their good friends and an incredible family in Martin and Carmel Naughton. And the Naughton family and their presence in Ireland is they know everybody and they have tremendous leverage, and they've brought Notre Dame back home to Ireland in so many unique and tangible and powerful ways. Many members from your Irish Advisory Council have stepped up and been incredibly supportive. And now, more recently, with an incredible gift from Brian and Deidre Klingon, we have announced the Klingon Family Center for the Study of Modern Ireland. That's just brand spanking new. Can you tell us what you envision to do through the new Klingon Center within the Keough-Naughton Institute?
Yeah, I keep using the word exciting over and over again, but that's indeed what it is. So you mentioned, by the way, before, I'll just say kind of Don and Martin, if they were like, we are so lucky, fortunate to have two titans, right? I used that word before too. One who represents Irish America, the other who represents Ireland. And the Keough-Naughton Institute is really, if you will, kind of the child of both of those visions. And so that's been wonderful. And I couldn't think of two better families that have done so much for us. But the Klingons are another, and it's really neat when you talk to a person in a group like Brian and Deirdre, who are so excited about what you're doing, but also share the same vision. And this vision for this place is really quite simple. It's this: try to think of a culture or society that's changed as much as Ireland has in the past generation. It's nearly impossible to, okay? And if you think about, some of that change has kind of really been difficult. Some of that change has been kind of enlightening. It's kind of all across the spectrum. We want to try to study that and understand that in all of its manifestations. And the Klingon Center allows us to do so. And it also allows us to kind of think about how that is shaping culture worldwide. So it's not only studying Ireland for the sake of Ireland, but it's thinking about Ireland as this place where dramatic cultural, social, economic, political change has been occurring. And really, how can we study Ireland to help us better appreciate these sorts of dynamics around the world? So we have all kinds of exciting things that are going to be planned for it. We will be hiring faculty who are going to be some of the leaders who study modern Ireland today, both say its recent history, but also kind of some of the more policy-oriented things. We are also going to be inaugurating what we're calling Klingon Conversations. And these conversations are going to be a way for us to nimbly, if you will, discuss some of the very latest issues in Ireland and look at them from all kinds of perspectives. But we hope that what happens, because of kind of the way that we talk about it humanistically, lots of people from multiple disciplines discussing these kinds of issues today, that really can kind of add to a broader conversation about the way that we should appreciate these things and understand them.
Any other ways you want to highlight how our students have embraced the Keough-Naughton Institute and Irish Studies at Notre Dame?
Oh, my Lord. Well, in so many different ways. Not only, the least of all, is kind of from the classes, right? So that's the one thing. You go to classes here and you're studying anything Irish, you're going to get some of the very best people in the world. And you're going to kind of open your mind up to this kind of new world of possibilities. But as I said before, we can offer unparalleled opportunities for our students also to study in Ireland. Now, some of that's the formal stuff, like going to study abroad in Dublin, an unbelievable program we have in Dublin, where our students will work at Trinity or at University College Dublin, depending upon their discipline. But through Kevin Whalen's leadership, these kids are getting kind of amazing experiences in Ireland and learning about it from so many different at so many different levels. What we do at Keough Abbey too is wonderful, and that's sort of like a partnership we have with the National University of Ireland at Galway. And so again, students from many different disciplines will have a different bite of Ireland, of what it means, and so we can more or less kind of tailor programs to what their interests are and what they want to take away from it. But if a student wants to do research in Ireland, they come to me with a research project, we'll send them there. If a student wants to learn the language, we'll send them there. Students want internships, we'll send them there. Okay, so again, a student can come here and they can kind of study this fascinating place that's changing so dynamically before our eyes, a place that punches well above its weight. And we can allow them to see this as it's happening in so many different ways. And at the same time, appreciate one of the world's richest, most vibrant cultures.
Fantastic. When you when you think about all that's going on right now, it's mind-boggling with the connections between Notre Dame and Ireland. We hope to be returning to Ireland in the next few years for another game, football game that was postponed because of the pandemic last summer. But those are still in discussions, and a lot of work's being done behind the scene to see if we can arrange something where we can bring the diaspora back home and many others who have a great love for Notre Dame back to Ireland. So that's in the works. You taught a course that I found particularly intriguing over the winter session just in January for our students. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh my God, that was so much fun. I can't believe sometimes they pay me to do what I do for a living, and this was one of those moments. So it's Notre Dame's boxing coach. His name is Nate Walker, had the idea that, you know what, suppose we team taught a course together on like the history of boxing. But we decided to make it not just a course where students would sit down and learn that history, but they'd actually do that history. And so Nate did all of the study of the different training techniques and regimens of so many of these boxers throughout time. And then he actually studied, as he would know anyway, the boxing styles of these guys. And we had the students do those kinds of things. So they were doing boxing workouts from the 19th century into the late 20th century and looking at how they kind of changed over time. Meantime, my job was to kind of teach them the history of boxing. And so they were learning, like, for example, about John L. Sullivan, Gentleman Jim Corbett, Jack Dempsey, Gene Tunney, but also looking at some vexed issues like, race.
Did you throw a little Rocky Marciano in there at all, or
Yeah,
not?
of course we had Rocky. For you, Lou, that was you. That was the kind of our St. Joseph's Day, if you will, is when we did Rocky Marciano. Of course we covered him, Rocky Marciano. And so it was just to kind of like move students throughout time, because the history of boxing is the history of America. It really is. And it's a fascinating kind of glimpse, a different sort of glimpse in looking at kind of those tensions that can vex us, but those tensions also that define us as who we are. And so it was really, really great. And the cool thing is when we did it, I wanted to, and Nate did too, to think of a way of thanking our students. Last semester he was hard. He was
Yes.
hard on them because we asked them to sacrifice so much, and in order to keep us here. So we talked about how proud Notre Dame is to be here. Make no mistake about it, Lou. The only reason we're here is because of these students
Right.
and because of what they did and the sacrifices they made. So this was my little way of thanking them, right? And so we decided, let's do a fun, rigorous course. It's very rigorous. They complain about too much reading, but that's good. They should always complain about too much reading. But by the end, we had them write these final papers, and we were blown away by kind of some of their insights and their ways of kind of tying all this together. And so it really, it was like one of those things you do almost on a lark, and just because you think you owe it to the students and to thank them. And it turns out to be this kind of little kind of gratifying gem that you couldn't even imagine. So it was really a lot of fun. So much so that we are going to turn it into a regular class, a regular 3-credit class the year after next. We're going to do this class. And when the boxing gym is open again, oh my God, Nate will put them through their paces. And that was another thing for me. He is like, the boxing program we have here is amazing because of what it does. Of course, how it helps the poor around the world. Also, how it helps our students. And so for me, watching Nate at work was really, really gratifying because of what a wonderful coach he is, how humane he is, but what a great teacher he is. So he didn't realize this too. And I would never say it to him too, because it would make his head too big. But I'm like taking notes, and I got to remember this of how to do something in a classroom or how to do that. So it was pretty cool.
Now, this isn't just an academic experience for you. You dabbled in boxing a little bit yourself. Didn't you have an experience in the last couple of years in New York City with boxing? Can you tell us a bit about it?
I can, yeah. So, Nate is not only kind of my friend and a teacher, he's also my boxing coach. So I decided a couple of years ago, having never boxed in my life, to take up the sport and see if a guy like my age, and I'm a year older today, a guy my age, can you learn how to box? And it was by far the most humbling thing that ever happened to me. But as is my wont too, I studied like old boxers, and I studied so much about the sport. I taught myself so much about the sport because I found it so endlessly fascinating. And one thing I really wanted to do was try to figure out, what is it like to get into the ring? It's one thing when you go in there and spar, and I did plenty of that, but it's another thing when you're going to be walking in there against someone and you have to really discover who you are. And so, like, I'll give you a couple examples. So I'm reading like Gentleman Jim Corbett, who is this kind of great heavyweight champion, the guy who actually defeated the great John L. Sullivan. And he wrote about the fear that you feel before and how you have to master the fear. But he talked about this one guy by the name of Dunphy. Dunphy, who is kind of going in to fight in the ring, and he became so paralyzed with fear he couldn't move. And the other guy fighting him didn't know what to do. Then he finally just punches him and decks him. He said that's what it was. And I was like terrified. If I go in the ring, am I going to pull a Dunphy? I was so worried about that. But then you find out there's like John L. never had a fear, never had a worry. Gene Tunney, a great boxer from the 20th century, likened it to an agony in the garden, the anxiety that you feel before. So I felt plenty of that anxiety before. But when I got into the ring, I felt absolute and utter calm, complete calm, and almost peace, as strange as it sounds, because you realize I can't go anywhere. As Nate says over and over again, there's no back doors in the ring, man. It's just you against the elemental, you know? And I just felt eerily, eerily calm. Now, if you want to find out how I did, and I fought in what were the World's Masters Championships, it's called that. It's not really that, you know? I'll say I made it to the finals. But if you want to find out how I did it, you'll have to read the book, because I've written a book about it and I'm trying to finish it up right now and find a publisher for it.
Oh, I love it. So a little suspense built in here at the end of the interview. Patrick, I just want to say thank you so much. First of all, your parents, immigrant parents, have to be so incredibly proud of you. We are indeed privileged, blessed to have you here at Notre Dame, educating our students day in and day out, using the Irish experience to talk about themes that are meaningful to each and every one of us every day through your scholarship. Congratulations again on the distinguished professorship from Oxford. We're really, really proud of you and really grateful for your leadership. And it's always fun having Irish for an interview like this, because you're so darn eloquent. You have so many, your storytelling abilities are, quite frankly, unparalleled. So I'm grateful for all
to be
of that.
Irish too, Lou. You know,
you're a great friend, and I really appreciate and enjoyed this time. I want to tell everybody that the only way you can follow Patrick possibly is next week to bring in an astronaut from outer space. And so next week on Wednesday at 3:55, and again, the timing of this, we're going to have about a 25-minute interview, and this is all programmed through NASA. Because of the satellite lineups that we can get, we got a 25-minute window where we're going to have the privilege of introducing astronaut and Notre Dame parent Mike Hopkins. He is the commander of the space station, and he's going to join us live Eastern Standard Time, 3:55 p.m. for a brief 25-minute interview. You're definitely going to want to join us for this unique experience next week. As we always do, Patrick, and all of you who have taken the time to be with us today, we always like to close with a prayer to Our Lady, the patroness of Notre Dame. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Take care. God bless. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and maybe more than any other time, go Irish. Thank you.